Good morning. Um, I made a few little changes here. One thing that I did was I moved the small Dell computer that I paid $200 for, which is running Windows 11. But there's a caveat, what do you call it? There's a thing that I'm not sure that it's 100% Windows 11 because occasionally there's an announcement that uh, something can't be added or something. So anyway, why am I mentioning that? I don't know. Anyway, I moved it over a little bit. I guess I could show you. Okay, let's see here. Well, I've got these cables, so that's not going to work very well. I tie the cables down with ties so that yeah. I guess I could probably I I haven't with my cell phone. I could probably pull that in to this, to this video. I mean, to a video that I'm making like this. I could probably go over and using Bluetooth or something, have it actually for something like this, and have it appear either full screen or. But anyway, I moved it about. Let's see, this is. Uh, Whoops, 8 inches. I moved it about 16 inches over. So and I had to move the printer because of that. I moved the printer that was sitting there. That printer is over right here. Um, but I moved that away, so that might help a little bit. Uh, Maybe removing a little bit of a sound that you might hear. But with my hearing, I'm not good about. But also, where it'll help me is, and well, right here, I'm touching it. Let me see if I move it this way. There it is. You can see the tip of the mic stand that's attached to the table. And the little Dell computer was right up next to this. And I think that's why a couple times I've left this hanging on there, just hanging over there, and made a video, which I deleted those two videos because you couldn't hear me. Maybe if you had cranked your volume way up, if it would go that far up. So I had deleted those. But now I think I would remember, seeing that hanging there all by itself now. So I might have solved that problem. But the other thing I wanted to move a little bit, and I don't think there's a lot of sound coming from that little computer. So I moved it over there away from the microphone and some other stuff. So things are kind of messy here right now. So anyway, I moved it over there. I've got the printer over here now. And in about a week, I'm going to order in one of those video editing type of boxes, whatever. I've shown that several times to you, so I won't show it again. And maybe the audio will be better. It's not bad now through this microphone. If you happen to know, I want to use this microphone. I'm not even using the headset. Well, I guess you call the whole thing, but I'm not listening to anything in here at all. I'm not listening to my own voice. I'm not listening to anything. I'm just using this microphone. And here in about a week, I'm going to have a box that I can feed in all of my audio, input, the microphones, the sound from the Avery Media camera, which I'm not using. I'm not using the built-in audio, and not from the riser. I'm not using it at all. I'm not using the video input, or I'm just not using that, but it's there, and I could use the audio from there. And I'm not using the audio from the Elgato Wave 3 because I can't come up with a stand. That device that's going to be coming, I'm not sure about that. That's what I need to really be using. But I have some options. So anyway, I'm moving things, and I always tie off the cables, on the leg of the desk and that type of stuff. So I have arthritis really bad, so I don't have to bend over and do that. The only thing is I'm constantly moving things, and I then go cut the cable ties off, and I have to get down and do it over again. So I'm probably not saving any pain at all. I've mentioned before, and if you've seen video outside, like if you've seen, which there are a bunch of videos of me walking with my cell phone, walking out the door, and you see the big wooden fence. We're in this apartment, we're right up against this fence, which is, and then on the other side of the fence is a pretty large building that's, I'm not sure if it's disability or just old people, or exactly who lives there. It's some type of a facility. It's one of those things people joke about, if you see an ambulance someplace, means there's an opening, for a room or a apartment or something or other. That's sort of that way that place is. You see an ambulance, and probably, maybe the person's going to the hospital and then coming back, but maybe there's a vacancy. So anyway, they've got, it's 2-story. You may have seen that too, and I'm making an outside video walking someplace to the mailbox or something. So it's 2-story, and on the back side of it is quite a bit of just land, and there's some tables out there for people to sit, and a few things like that. And if there's quite a few, several people over there have dogs that they bring out, and let them play or something or other. But just a few minutes ago, I was looking out to see if we had any cats on our patio or out coming our way or something. And I looked over, and the grass next door, because of the heat, and I'm not sure they even have, well, I'm sure they have some faucets on the outside of the building. I don't see them wetting down their, and I don't think it's doing any good. In fact, putting water on it and then the heat coming down, sun coming down, might be worse. So they really don't have any grass over there to speak of, This place here, the apartment complex that we live in, they have flowers planted over here. They have sprinklers that come on occasionally, and add some water over here. They have a company that comes out and cuts the grass on a regular occasion. And they do some maintenance on the grass and stuff. Over next door, I'm trying to think if I've seen in the past. I think maybe in the past I've seen, somebody with a riding thing, and cutting the grass, but The grass over there is really brown, and very short. So anyway, I was just looking out, and then I saw smoke coming up. Where's that smoke coming from, And I'm looking, and then I can see it's moving this way, this way, and then I could see eventually, a little in the front of it, leading edge of it or whatever, fire. The grass was burning, and I was surprised at how fast that was moving and heading this way. I wasn't concerned that this place was going to catch on fire at that point, but I figured that if it got to this wooden fence, that would go, and that would be a problem, because it's all along, here. And anyway, which she's not listening, where I was standing right around the corner was Darlene's bed, the dining room, and then right there is the kitchen, so her area basically is the kitchen, and what it is the dining room, but it's her bedroom, or the bed there. And then she comes out of that area over into what would be the living room, and there's her computer desk, and then there's just junk thrown, all over there. But anyway, I told her, but she doesn't listen because she's watching her video, the things that she watches all the time. I mean, she watches movies and TV things, over cable, but she also watches all the game shows, and then they're saved. So right now there's a strike over here in the United States of writers, who write for comedy shows, game shows, all kinds of shows. That you kind of wonder when you see a table with 4 or 5, 6 people, talking about the morning news every day or whatever. They have writers, and so she's watching a whole bunch of game shows because a bunch of the game shows are not, they're on strike, the writers. But anyway, she doesn't listen to me because even when she's in the living room, and she'll be playing. When I say game playing, you're picturing, I don't know. I can't think of any games because I don't play them except for Civilization, and I haven't played that in months. And Civilization 6. And I can't think of any game shows, or any games. But if she'll be playing solitaire or things after solitaire, and if I tell her something, she just tunes me out. And because playing, and they're not really their games. The games type thing she plays there'll be a scene, and then the thing will say, I don't know, find the commode. She'd know, I think, what a commode was, or and then but a whole bunch of things that you don't, things like that. I've never played those games. I have no interest in playing the games, but she plays. Anyway, so I said to her, I said, first I said, there's smoke, because I was standing right by the door to now there's no door there, right next to her bed, really. And I was looking out our patio door, to our patio and beyond, and I said, there's a bunch of smoke coming this way. What's going on? And she didn't say anything. It's because she wasn't listening. I mean, my voice would have been, but she just turned it off. So then I said, oh, there's fire. The grass is on fire. She didn't say anything. So, and I said, it's moving fast this way. And then she didn't say anything, and so I just took 2 or 3 steps over, and I said, the grass is on fire out here, over next door, And she says, the grass is on fire? I said, yeah, and it's heading this way. And then I said, wait a minute, I see a hose. Oh, okay. There's a fire station that is right next to the entrance. It's right next. I could almost throw a rock from out in front of this apartment over and almost hit the, if I was a baseball player or something, I probably could throw a baseball that far. So anyway, I said, they're okay, the firemen are here, and of course they put it out real quick. But it's hot here and every place else miserable. Although I almost never get out. So, what else is going on? It would be bad if this fence caught on fire. And there's always a possibility, the fence catch on fire and then, some embers will land on the roof or something like that, But these people here keep this place very good, And the maintenance guys, there's just 2 of them. But I think basically they're doing the same thing over and over again, so they know what's going to happen, you know what I mean? They're going to be called occasionally, for a sink that stopped up, or they go through the same things. I'm not sure how often they get a new thing coming, but that makes it really good because they pretty much have all the tools and things they need, and they know pretty much what's going to be happening. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, people who live here can take our trash out to the curb, and then on those mornings, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, those 2 guys come and they go around and they pick it all up and put it in the trash containers. On the other days, it's our job to take the trash over and put it in the trash containers. What hasn't worked here is recycling, because they have big bins, big gigantic things that trucks come in. I don't know, you hear them in the morning, it scares our cat. They come in and they go and they slide their things underneath these things and they dump them into their containers, and then they leave. But there's another smaller thing that's on wheels that's for recyclable. And when I moved in and everything, I was told, that there's a recyclable bin there, and be sure you put recyclable stuff in there or whatever. And the people here would just throw stuff in there that wasn't recyclable. And so they just ended up putting a padlock on the thing, so we actually can't put anything in there because people just they don't know what recyclable is, I guess. Now I've been places too where they have like 6 or 7 bins, and they're for different things, One is for cans, something else for bottles, something else for, so. But anyway, we almost had a little fire here. I might have had a video with something on it. I can hear this rubbing. I mentioned once before I was sort of a volunteer firefighter during the time that Roots was showing. Roots, the TV thing back a long time ago. I think it ran 4 days in a row, I think it was. And I was in the training to be a volunteer firefighter. When I moved out from Kansas City, Missouri to Belton, Missouri, a smaller town. I called the local police department. Now, I never tried to in Kansas City, Missouri. I found out later on I could have been a security officer in Kansas City, Missouri, which I was. And I could have been a reserve police officer there also. They wouldn't have a problem with that. I figured there would be a problem. And so I worked there. Well, I worked there, let's see, well, not at that hospital. Let's say 5. Let's do another 5, make it easy, the math easy. And another 5, 15 years I worked 3 different hospitals. Actually longer than that. Some of them were longer than 5 years. And then I went out, still working for the same hospital, but I went out to this small hospital they just built. So then I thought, well, I could be a reserve police officer and, help out in that way. And so I called the police department, and they connected me with the chief of police. And no, you can't be you can't be a reserve police officer because you're a security officer, and whatever. And I said, well, I'm a security officer in Kansas City, Missouri. Well, wait a minute, I just moved there. I was talking to the Belton. That's right. And he said, oh, you can't be a reserve police officer and be working security out here. And I said, oh, okay. So then I heard that there was, in the little town next to Belton, a few 100 feet from where I was living, they had a volunteer fire department, and so I went over and applied for that, and yeah, okay, So then I started going through the training, and then I heard that they had a volunteer fire department or a police department in Raymore. And so I checked there. Oh yeah, happy to have, because I think they had 6 and I was the 7th one. And reserve, well, I had to go through the training. Not to the police academy, but through I had to ride with the other officers and stuff like that. But I mean, I was doing hospital security. I handled more situations than the volunteer or the reserve police officer did in Raymore. And in years. It was so. But so then, anyway, I got enough hours in patrolling and what have you, and Raymore, made me a reserve officer, and they needed somebody for Sunday night. They had 6 officers, and each one patrolled one night, and it was up to us, really. We could come in at 3 p.m. if we wanted to, or we could come in whatever we wanted to, on our day or whatever. You could come in at 3 p.m., but most of us come in at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. and worked. And when we left, when we went off duty, there wasn't anybody in the beginning. Years later, then we had started hiring in, full-time officers. And I still patrolled. And Sunday night. And when we first got our first full-time officer, he worked the midnight shift. And so I would come in at, so he wouldn't be working, during the day, or he wouldn't be working. I'd come in and I'd maybe come in at 7 p.m. and I would work, and then he'd come on at midnight. And even though I and these other officers were working by ourselves, when he would come on, I would stay over as long as I could, so he would have somebody with him. And so I was patrolling Sunday, and I arranged that I had at the security job that I was working. at the hospital. I had Mondays and Tuesdays off, so I stayed over till 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, depending on what was going on. But so anyway, I had already put in, remember, to be a reserve officer. I mean a volunteer firefighter. And so I was going through that training. And the movie Roots, was a 4-day epic that kind of blew people's minds away. It made a real difference, I think, in a lot of people's thinking. So I watched the first day. I watched the second. Of course, it was on at night. Everybody was watching, by the way, in the entire United States. Everybody, maybe not in the South. I don't know. So I watched Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and the last night was Thursday night. And I started watching, and the tone went off. And from the fire department. Now I was not, I was in training. I was not an official, But anyway, I headed to get there to the fire station, and it was very close to the fire station. But I'd never made it to the fire station in time to get on the fire truck. Now they had more than one fire truck, but usually one truck went out, depending on what it was. And so I would pull in. Oh, by the way, since I was not an official volunteer firefighter at that time, I had a siren on my vehicle, but it was for the, police department. And I had on the dash, a little, light that was intended to be blue, but I didn't have permission to use it, and so it was actually red, and I had a black or blue stocking cap over the top of it. So I'd never made it to the on those other days when the tone would go off, day or night or whatever. I would pull into the fire station just as the truck was leaving with the volunteer firefighters. I never made it. And one reason I couldn't make it was, of course I was in Belton, the city right next to it, but right there again I could throw a rock and almost go over, outside into the Raymore city limits. But 58 Highway was when I would leave the house that we lived in and go several blocks down. Then there was you'd come to 58 Highway, and the traffic was pretty, and I couldn't turn. I mean, somebody else probably would have done it, but I didn't. The rules were rules, so I didn't turn on the lights or the siren. So I'd stop, and a car would go by, and I'd be waiting. There'd be a car coming out waiting, and then by the time I got to the fire station, the fire truck would be leaving. So, but this is Roots. So, and the people in the town and people who lived outside of the town, really, they responded really, volunteer firefighters. They didn't get anything for it, except helping people. Some volunteer fire departments, I understand, in the nation, there are more volunteer firefighters because of, in the United States than there are, I think, like firefighters in the United States. I think like 70% of them are volunteer firefighters because of small communities and they can't afford fire departments. So they do a tremendous job, and some of them do different things a different way. Maybe you get, $5 or something if if you go out or something. I don't know. It varies. But by the way, if you're interested in something like that, there's a ton of YouTube videos on, volunteer fire departments or whatever. Well, not just volunteer, but real fire departments. Well, the others are real fire departments too. But I've watched some of those on YouTube, volunteer fire departments, and I mean, man, some of those are really, I mean, they have really fantastic equipment and facilities and the whole thing. And then some of them have, I mean, it's pitiful, and it's pitiful. And I've seen some, like I saw, they had some nice houses. I saw this one. I saw more than one, but this one video, and the volunteer fire department arrives, and it's a nice house. I mean, it's a nice housing division, and it's a nice house, and the fire is a little fire there, and these volunteer fire, you get out, and they don't know what in the fuck they're doing. They park their cars or their the truck or whatever. Not so much the fire engine. I think those guys that are on it had enough sense not to park it. I mean, they parked it where they had to, by a hydrant if there was a hydrant or whatever they needed to do. But the volunteers that are coming for their home, they don't go to the station and get in another fire truck or something. Dependent. In this video, no. These guys show up. So there's 2 or 3 volunteer firemen who came from the fire station with the fire truck. They show up. But the rest of the guys who show up, they drive their cars right up close to on the lawn of the place that's on fire or something. They're in the way. The firemen can't get to the hydrant, the other firemen, the ones that showed up with the truck. And it was pitiful to see. By the way, the person I remember that made that video, I watched a whole bunch of his videos, and he was for a larger community. He was a paid, he was not a volunteer firefighter. And the people with him were not volunteers. And he discussed about, everything that these guys were doing wrong. Although he didn't rip them up. I mean, he was sympathetic. But he was saying, they didn't get that house burned down, and a house next to the another house next to it was burning down. So but the volunteer firefighters do a tremendous anyway. So like I said, I'd never made it to okay, so Roots is playing, very popular, everybody's watching it in the United States. Great show. So I don't have any trouble. I get in my, and of course I have a radio. But I get up to that intersection that I'd always before there'd be cars coming, and I wasn't going to pull at it. Now there was a couple of volunteer firefighters in training that I knew. One lived over the next town, and he was talking to me about how he pulled in before I did. Like one time I would have made it to get on the truck, and I could almost see the fire department. Not quite, but I really. And he was working at work, and he left work. He worked at True Value Hardware Warehouse. And he pulled out on 71 Highway, and he was honking his horn. I'm kind of sorry to say this, but because it does, but this is not, he didn't have his thing, and I don't know if he probably had lights, but no, he'd have used them if he'd have had them. So he was driving down the highway honking his horn and pointing. He told me, he says, now they moved out of my way. I was pointing to the sticker I had on there that said volunteer firefighter. They were getting out of his way because there was a crazy guy. So anyway, I made it up to the intersection, no traffic. Everybody was at home watching Roots. And I turned down the highway, and I got to the fire station, and one person was there. That was the fire chief, and I was there, and we took the truck out. Luckily, it didn't turn out to be anything. I forget what it was. It wasn't anything at all. It was, but all these other volunteer firemen, and there was a bunch of them, and even the ones that were in training, there was like 10 of those, or a little bit more maybe, who were anxious to get their card and everything and be able to put their lights and sirens on. And then so anyway, the chief and I went out, and then now remember, by this time I was a reserve police officer with the Raymore Police Department. So we come back to the station, and we really didn't have to clean the vehicle or anything, because I forget what it was. It wasn't anything, and I mean, really, it was nothing. So we come back, and then on the radio, because it varied for a while. For a while, the dispatcher dispatched for the reserve officers, or for the police department, and for the volunteer fire department. And then the volunteer fire department wanted their own, and they paid somebody, stuff like that. Stuff like that went on. But so the fire chief and I are there, and we're done closing up, and then the reserve officer, of course I knew who he was, I heard him on the radio. He called dispatch, and at that time we were sharing dispatch, and he called dispatch, and he said, how many firefighters responded on that fire? And the dispatcher said, I don't know. And the fire chief said, that goddamn son of a bitch and Raymore police officer, volunteer Raymore police officer, none of his goddamn business who it is. And then or how many, and I thought, oh shit. So then I was there. I didn't care. I mean, what he said did not bother me at all. I think that the officer should, write down on his activity sheet, fire department responded. I wouldn't have put reserve, I just put fire department responded to, one truck, maybe a pumper or whatever went on, and maybe I'd have put two firemen or something. I would have put that on my activity sheet. Wouldn't have been any big deal, but I would have registered, but I didn't care. But anyway, the goddamn, reserve police officer, Raymore police officer, none of his goddamn business. And so I'm there, and of course it's just us two, and I'm thinking, shit, goddamn. I mean, I didn't care what the fire chief said. I was thinking, oh, okay, he doesn't know that I'm a reserve officer. And now when he finds out, he's going to be embarrassed, and he's going to think that I was mad or something. And I was thinking, how do I put it? What do I say? By the way, Chief, I didn't say anything, I should have, I guess. And I guess I should have said, Chief, by the way, I'm a reserve officer with Raymore PD. What you said, I don't care about that at all. It doesn't bother me. I'm not upset with you. I just want you to... I should have done something like that, but I didn't. And I knew it was... So then, right after that, there was... And of course, there was a whole bunch of... There was like 7 reserve officers. I did Sunday. The other guys did it, at night. And for the volunteer fire department, because you need more volunteer, or you need more firemen than you do police officers, So anybody mandatory, training at the fire department. So there must have been, I don't know, 50 of us or something, firefighters, And so the chief gets up, okay, now no excuses. It was homecoming or something like that. Once a year, it's a big thing for a lot of small towns. It was for Raymore, They had, concession stand set up, and I don't know, maybe ponies for little kids. I mean, it was, a big deal. So anyway, the chief says, "Okay, I've already made out the assignments. Everybody has an assignment. There is no excuse. That's your assignment. That's what it's going to be, and no excuses." And so then okay, you're going to be, such and such. You're going to take the ambulance, and you'll be the medical unit, and then he says, and okay, Jim Howard, you're going to be with such and such or whatever. And I said, Chief, I'm sorry, I'm working for Raymore PD that night, and I won't be, because Raymore PD had been assignment for me. I was the undercover one. And so anyway, he says, I said, "Why can't you?" And I said, "I'm working for Raymore PD that time at that event." And then his face got red, and then he walked over to the dispatcher, who was dispatcher for the fire department, real nice guy by the way, and dispatcher for the police department. And then I could see, the chief looking at me. I think he was probably more embarrassed, but maybe pissed too. I don't know. Maybe, so then it was time for all of us, the 8 or 9 or 10 or 12, however, that had gone through the training. It was time for us to get our permit, which I really did at that point. At that point, I already knew. I would rather be a reserve police officer, because that's what I've been, hospital security for, I don't know, 20 years at that time or something, maybe 15 years. I don't know. And I also worked on my days off, contract security on my days off. So I was working, I worked for Burns. In addition, I worked 30 years hospital security altogether, but for many of those years I worked on my days off for Burns, Pinkerton, Wells Fargo, Watchman Service. You can just go through a whole list of them, that I did. And I knew being a fireman is a hard job, a dirty job, and you don't get as much glory, as a police officer does, Don't get enough credit, and stuff. So I thought, no, but I did want to finish the training and have the certificate and everything. And so anyway, I could tell, oh shit. And so anyway, everybody's waiting, like the tone still went off, and I responded up, and tried to get there. Still had trouble getting there, The other guys would be going out, and I'd pull into the, and yeah. Oh, that's the thing about the. Remember, the chief of police, the fire chief, and me were the only ones that respond, because of those people. The people were good at responding for their community to help protect it and that kind of stuff. But on that night, everybody was watching Roots except the fire chief and me. But so then the guys are saying, I think the tone would go off, and there'd be other guys too that would show up, and the truck already was leaving, because they had as much trouble as I did getting there. And they, like this couple guys were saying to me, "Why haven't we got our thing? We should have got our permit, so we could, use the blue lights and the siren. Why haven't we got them?" And I thought, oh shit, I know. I think I know. So I forget how long went, some time went by, a week or so or something, and guys are still, why aren't we getting? I'm guessing that they went and asked the fire chief or the assistant fire, both the fire chief and the assistant fire chief. Well, all those people were really nice. The chief, fire chief, and the assistant chief were really nice guys. So anyway, I got told, by the way, they called me or whatever. The assistant fire chief wants to meet with you. So I go up. I had an idea what it was going to. So I went in, and he said, Jim, we found out that you're a police officer with Raymore. And he says, you can't be a police officer and you can't be a firefighter at the same time. Now at this point I was just playing with him. I said, why is that? Now I didn't want to be at that point. I just wanted them to give me the certificate saying, so I could put that in my notebook or whatever. And he said, well, if you showed up at a fire, we wouldn't know if you were a fireman or if you were a police officer. And I said, that's easy. If I show up with an axe, I'm a fireman. If I show up with a gun, I'm a policeman. And he did, and I didn't smile or anything. No, that, you can't be, both. And I said, oh, okay. And so, and I never explained, anything. But I also, I was glad that because being a firefighter is difficult. And probably for that community, it was probably more dangerous than being a, police officer, maybe. Because there was fires quite often, and you're breathing in smoke and everything else. So that's my root story. I wrote down on my, where I put information so I could, if I was applying for a job, that I put down that I took, fire department training on such and such, and I went out and I did get a certificate for that. No, okay, wait a minute, that was EMT training. Yeah. That was later, yeah. That was EMT training, which was with the fire department that I had tried to get on. They held their training at the hospital that I was working at, Research Belton Hospital. So I did my thing. There was a few times I went up and I decided I needed to check something, and I'd leave and come right back. And then at 9 o'clock I locked the hospital. So when we were going through the EMT training, the guy doing the training and everything, he says, okay, we're going to take a coffee break and everything because Jim needs to go lock the hospital up. And two, when that training started for the EMT thing, unfortunately, Kansas City, Missouri Police Department had a confrontation with a volunteer. I'm not sure if he was a volunteer or not, with a EMT. The EMT was eating in downtown Kansas City, and there was an accident or something right outside the window. I guess he's sitting there eating with his family or something in it, and the police arrive, and I don't know what happened, I don't know what happened. But the volunteer fireman, now he was not in his uniform or anything like that. He goes out, and I think I know who he was by the way the things went down. He wasn't one of he from out there. I mean, this was Kansas City, but he went out, and the police told him just stay on the sidewalk or go back. We don't need you or something like that. And he insisted that they did need him, and they told him to get on this, and they handcuffed him and took him to jail. And this made the newspapers, of course. And so then it's the first day of our EMT training out there at the hospital I'm working at. And they talked about that a little bit before we started the training. And they were looking daggers at me. And then the situation wasn't helped in a way, because the first part of the training that we had was what would it be? What would you? How would I? Anyway, having to do with authority, how you handle. You arrive. What can you do? What can you not do? Can you? Uh, if somebody doesn't want to, if somebody has their arm laying chopped off or whatever, can you take them to the hospital? What if they don't want to go? I mean, it was questions like that in the test, and I aced it. I knew I would because that's exactly for the 30, well, it wasn't 30 years in. Every day that I was a hospital security officer, I had to deal with those kind of things, and I had to know how to handle all those situations. And so I got an A, I got 100% or whatever right, and the other guys, they did okay, they did fine for them, yeah, they were fine, but I could feel the daggers, anyway, uh, the instructor, or whatever, said, "Oh, Jim got 100%," and I don't know if the other guys said anything or if there was a groan or whatever, and I said, "Hey," I said, "you guys are don't worry." I said, "This is something I have to deal with in hospital security all the time, over and over again. It's like the most important thing, probably." I said, "But the rest of this training, you guys are all going to do better than I am in this." And sure enough, that's what happened. I mean, I got 100% on that, and on how many bones were in the body, and all this other stuff. How to intubate somebody, and all the rest of the stuff these other guys did. They did great. So then they forgot about that other thing. So, but and that's the thing. I got the certificates and so forth. So I got the police department paid for my EMT, or for my EMT training. The police department paid for it, and they held the training they even held the training. I mean, I was just one person, and they even checked with me, or they knew what and so I was able to go to, when we went out to the junkyard and cut the vehicles apart, the roofs off and the doors off and all that kind of stuff. So the extrication of that type of stuff. They were really nice, and but I actually, from the guy that was described in the newspaper that got arrested or whatever, I actually think I do know who he was, because he was calling into my computer bulletin board system, and I know some other things that he did. Oh, anyway, that guy. Okay, if that's the guy, well, let me tell you about this guy. I don't know for 100% that it was this guy, the one that got arrested by Kansas City PD for, not getting back on that. And I don't know what the situation. I don't know if the police officers were right. I mean, he wasn't, in uniform. He didn't have his ID, well, he probably had an ID in his pocket, but I mean, he didn't have, he didn't have a first aid kit or anything. So I don't know what the situation was with that. But this other guy, and he was younger than I was, because he was, when I had my bulletin board system, this other guy, let's call him Glenn, because that's his first name. He was, one of the young kids that called into my thing. Anyway, he was, well, then later on, he was in the Civil Air Patrol. He was in the Civil Air Patrol. He was in the National Guard or the Army Reserve. I think the National Guard. He was an EMT, and he was a couple other things like that. So, and he told everybody, and anyway, he was 26 years old. He never had a girlfriend. uh, he he uh, oh, and he thought he was a computer hacker. He called himself a computer hacker. Uh, and uh, and at that point he was working for AT&T or whatever. I think it was. Was it AT&T? And his job was, he thought he said that he was a computer technician or whatever. Now, he took the tapes when the tape was filled with data. He took it off. He put the lid on. Put it, I guess, in the container. Maybe they let him write the date or time or something on it, and then he put it in the storage room. And then eventually it was taken to a facility someplace underground, and that's what he did. And he put a new tape on. That's what he did. Uh, and anyway, I have this computer bulletin board system. There was this lady who was married who called in and got into chat with me. And she was married. So she would sit at her computer chatting with me about stuff. Nothing, nothing sexual really or anything. And to be looking out the window, and then she'd say, "Okay, I gotta go. My husband's coming home." And she would end the thing. So, anyway, so I was right around that time, we were chatting, and she says, and she worked at AT&T or whatever that was, the company that that Glenn worked at for a while, not long. He got fired immediately. She said, "Oh my God, it was terrible today." She said, "There's this guy," and she mentioned something like, well, he's an EMT and he talks about that. He carries his little, that wasn't what he was hired for. He has his, and she said he all he does is take the tape off, that's on a reel, and puts it in a thing and takes it to a room. Then he comes back and do it. And something happened with our AT&T system, with the thing, and he told people. I don't think she saw him, but he told people, "Oh, I know how to fix that." And I said, "Don't." And he went and he just started, pushing buttons, doing shit. He took AT&T down, American Telephone and Telegraph Company. I think that was it. He took their system down. They had a crash. It was in the newspaper. There was a crash. He was fired, And then, I know it was. I don't know if that he was a fireman or they got in with the police, but um, um, she told me. She says, "Oh my God, they fired him and everything." And then later on, he told me, "I'm not working for AT&T anymore." I said, "Oh, is there some kind of a problem?" "No, no, I just moved on. I'm working at," and he told me who else he was working for then. So that's an unbelievable story. I mean, wow. Oh, anyway, so my daughter, who was about his age, Glenn's age, she was living with me at that time, and my son was too, I think. And so I was at work. She got on the computer, and went into chat, and he came, he went to hit the chat thing, and he didn't know, and then bang, he's talking to my daughter, and my daughter had a boyfriend. She had several boyfriends. I forget how old she was. She had several boyfriends, and so then when I got into chat, he said, "Oh, I talked to your daughter. Oh, and whatever," and he says, I forget, I can't remember, it's been years, but you know, let's say, he says, you know, yeah, I'd like to date her. And I said, she has a boyfriend. And I knew, you know, I knew Hillary was another level than Glenn was. And so anyway, a few days later or something like that, he shows up at the door. Oh, Hillary's boyfriend was there. He'd come to pick Hillary up and take her out on a date. And Glenn comes to the door, and I said, "Oh," he says, "I'm Glenn." You know, gives me his line. "Oh, Glenn, come on in." And he says, "Yeah, you know, I think he might have whispered to me, you know, I'm here, you know, I'm gonna be Hillary's boyfriend." And I said, "She's got a boyfriend, you know." And and then Hillary and the boyfriend are leaving, you know, and Glenn says, you know, I'm Glenn," and whoop, she just walks on by, closes the door in his face, you know, and left, you know. So then I forget how I saw him, if we went out to eat or what it was, but I saw him with some type. There was some woman or girl, and I don't know if it was somebody that I knew or what. I can't remember what except he said to her, "Oh, I mean, he just met her. You know, my name's Glenn. I'm an EMT. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I'm in the National Guard. He went through this list of, you know, things." And so then she took off running, really, you know, not running really, but you know. So then I said, Glenn, look, it's great that you're in the Civil Air Patrol and that you're in all these things. That's great, you know. But when you meet somebody, and especially when you meet a woman, or if you meet anybody, don't tell them those things. Maybe you tell them one thing, but don't go through the whole thing. I said, it's better, don't do that. That does not work good for you. I said, you know, you meet the person, you talk to them or whatever, and then, you know, if something comes up, you know, you could say, you know, hey, I like you, you know, I think we have a lot in common or something. And you say, you know, you could say, I'd like to take you out to eat, you know, now or something, if that would, but I can't because I am in the reserve or the National Guard or whatever it is. I said, even if that's not, even if you're not, I mean, if you're not doing anything, say that I'm in the National Guard and I have to go to training tonight. But how about, you know, Friday? Would Friday do it? But no, he couldn't. When he met somebody, he went through the whole thing, and these people are like, what? Let me get the fuck away from this guy. And then I had a young, well, she was, you know, I think 18 or something, and I was older than 18, by the way. And she called into the bulletin board system or whatever, and got into chat. And she said, you know, I'm 18. She wanted me to know that she was, you know, that she was young. I think I told her, I don't know how old I was. See, I was divorced at that point, and I got married at 26. I think I was like 40. So I was 40. And she was telling me, she says, well, I mean, I'm not going to repeat what she was telling me, you know. And I said, no, and I said, but I got this friend. And this was a mistake on my part. But anyway, he hadn't had a girlfriend, and he was 26. And so I said, I got this friend and everything. She said, well, I want you to come over. And I said, no, 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 I'm not doing it. And I said, but I got this friend. And then she was still like, I was sort of a celebrity because I was a systop, um, and okay, I'm not. You might want to disconnect at this point. You might want to drop out. I'm not proud about this, but I said, well, I said I have too many women to. I can't. And then she was like, I'm really good, and whatever. I said, well. She says, oh, and I said, no, well, okay, I got this friend, and I said, in a situation like this, what I have to do is I have to send him out to check the female out to see, if you've got what it takes, because I forget what I was playing. I was having some fun doing that, So, and she said, okay. She says, send him over and everything, and so I told Glenn, I said, now, when I talked to him or whatever, okay, I found a woman for you. I should not have done that because he had zero experience, and I think I know she had a lot of experience. Stupidity on my part. The only time I've ever been stupid in my life. So, and I said, okay, now don't tell her that don't go through that list. Just, and be careful. Take it slow and easy and all that kind of stuff. And then I, gave him whatever. I guess I talked to her and told him, got her address and whatever. She actually lived in Kansas City, Kansas. And so then I heard back from him. And okay, he got laid. Probably more because she was trying, well, first she called me up and she said, okay, she says, now can you come over, she said, I forget what she said. I think he probably had everything done that could be done. And then I heard, and I said, well, no, I can't do it. I forget what my excuse was, you didn't make the grade. I probably wouldn't have said that. I forget what it was. No. So then I heard from Glenn, I've got a girlfriend. It's the one you sent me on. And he says, you're not going to take her away from me, are you? You're not going to take her away from me, are you? And I said, no, I set you up with her, but be careful. And I think, really be careful. I mean, use protection and all kinds of stuff. I think, I think she's had a lot of experience or whatever. And then I didn't hear from him for a long time. He didn't log in even to my bulletin board system, which was unusual. He was like a regular. He didn't log into that. I didn't hear from him. And then I heard from him somehow, and he said that he hadn't been contacting me because he was afraid that I would take her away from him. And I should have taken her away from him. Oh, God. His parents owned a nice home someplace. And they, in the summer, went to someplace, I can't remember, never can remember the name, off the coast of Texas. It's an island, and there's a lot of people from, like I knew people from Missouri. A girl that was my girlfriend, I thought, when I was in grade school. When I was in the 3rd or 4th grade, I just loved her. And we didn't, kiss or anything, I went to Catholic school, she went to Catholic school, But, okay. So, I guess the reason is because I found out later on that this Carrie was her name, that I liked when I was in grade school. But we went to Catholic school. We didn't know anything about sex, or anything of it. And there wasn't any internet, or wasn't anything, Um, but years later, many years later, I mean, well, I changed schools for the 5th grade, so I went to a different Catholic school. They had 3 TV stations. One was Channel 9, and there was a guy on the afternoon that would show movies for kids. And you could send in a picture you could draw a picture, or something, and send it in. And I sent in a picture of to Commander 9 or whatever. I sent in a drawing of a spaceship or something. So I was probably in the 5th grade. Maybe I was in the 6th grade. And I was watching Commander 9 and the phone rang. And it was Carrie, the girl. And she said, "Oh, Jimmy, I saw that you're drawing on Commander 9. Back then we had like 3 TV stations, and that's all there was. So, Yeah. And of course I was embarrassed because I thought maybe I was a little too old to be sending in a drawing to Commander 9. But so anyway, we talked a little bit, and that was it. And then many years later, in my WordPress thing, I don't think it was my video, or I'm not sure I was doing videos then. I think that was before Radio Shack Model 1 computer came out. But anyway, years went by, and anyway, and in my I did publications before 1982, since I was in grade school. Did a radio program that was broadcast around the world on shortwave radio 3 times a week. Same show, though. I mean, they repeated it because of different being broadcast to different areas. My voice is going. Anyway, I mentioned in there that in my WordPress thing, probably, that back when I was in grade school, that I had this. I won't mention her last name, but not that it matters, I mentioned Carrie, and that I really liked her, and her parents owned a grocery store. Back then, there were small grocery stores, and Italian families or other families, owned the grocery stores and stuff. That's before Walmart and all that kind of stuff. I hope you can still hear me. So I mentioned in there that I told my mother she was having a party, Halloween party, and I told my mother, "You need to buy me a costume." And I said, "But don't give me a costume that had my mother waited till the last day. And I said, "Don't give me a costume that has short pants." She got me a pirate costume with short pants, and I was embarrassed, and to go to. Anyway, I blogged about that, or and the reason I mentioned that, and I back then I was checking the obituaries or whatever, and I saw that Carrie's father had passed away. And so I mentioned that, I saw that, so-and-so. I didn't know him, but it was in the obituaries, survived by, and the kids listed and stuff. So I put that in there, and then I got a call from, or did she leave a comment? Might have left a comment. Probably left a comment. And then maybe I got her phone number. She said, Oh, Jim, I I read in your your thing about that you saw my father's obituary, and I forget what I said about. I didn't know anything about him, but I forget what I said, but it was okay. Whatever I said was, and I put in there that I liked her and that my mother got me a. And I put in there too that the only thing in my life that, and which is true, that I ever stole in my life, I stole for her. Actually, we'd had a flood in Kansas City, Missouri, and it was a really bad flood. Started up some fires, that were filled with fuel that were floated or something, and it was pretty much a big disaster. I mentioned that in there, and anyway, I did steal a box of thermos or temperature things with a suction cup on it that you could in your car you could stick it on the dash, and I stole that because the two guys I was with, they were stealing stuff, and so I did that. And then I stole, that was a bracelet, I think it was, for Carrie. And in my entire life, that's the only thing, the suction cups. Oh, which I told my parents. My parents said, "Where did you get those?" There was like 12 of them because they were supposed to have taken them out, but they didn't. And I stole the 12 of them, probably $1.50 or something each. And my parents said, "Where'd you get those?" And I said, "Oh, well, there was flood damage from the flooding, and the store was giving them away or something." Oh, okay. So, but anyway, then I stole a bracelet, and I'm sure I don't know what it looked nice, looked expensive, but it wasn't. You wouldn't, or I wouldn't have been able to steal it. And I gave it to her. And then her mother called my mother and said, "I just wanted to check with you. Is it okay that Jimmy gave her a bracelet?" And I don't know exactly what my mother said, but I got into trouble for it. But that's the only thing in my entire life that I ever stole. In fact, there were things like given away, not because it didn't have anything to do with that, but like one of the hospitals that I worked at for the employees. Now, one time I did eat for some reason. I ate the Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, but I didn't take. Now, okay, when the hospitals that gave money, when they did that, I took the money. When they gave X amount of money, $25 or whatever to every employee or something, I took that. But I never went down to the purchasing department and said, "I'm moving. Can I have those cardboard boxes that you're not using?" Which anybody would do, and it would be fine to do it. I didn't do that. But when a thing came up at the hospital about something being stolen, and security officers had to go through a lie detector test. I mentioned this, I think, in the past in greater detail. The other security officers were like, several of them were pissing their pants. They were so afraid at something, and I hooked me up, and because I wouldn't even take anything, zero anything, and I would definitely not steal anything. But anyway, Carrie, I started to say her last name. She thanked me for what I said about her and whatever, and then we talked that she was married to a nice man, and they had a farm, and that they go down to this island off the coast, like a lot of people do that. When the winter gets bad, they went down because they were retired or whatever, and they went down and stayed on the island off, where it was nice and warm. So, but I did have to wear a pirate thing with short pants. Also, I mentioned this too. My WordPress site got a lot of traffic, and I had people contact me. There was a police officer who patrolled St. Joseph Hospital where I worked. That's where we had a total of 10 security officers working there, not 10 per shift. That was it. Do the math. See how try to cover 24 hours a day at a hospital with 10 people. We had somebody on duty, but 2 at the most. And there's a few times when I worked when it was impossible to do because the nuns would not pay for overtime or anything. But anyway, there was a police officer, Eugene Segan, about the best police officer I've ever met, and that was his district. And he was Catholic, and sort of like me in a way. On Sundays when he patrolled, I would hear him go, what was it, 10-7 or not 10-42, 10-42 is going. I'd hear him and I knew he was, at the church, the Catholic church over there, he was popping in for Mass real quick. He'd go temporarily out of service or whatever, and he'd go into the church. And he was really a neat guy, a good police officer. And when John Galegas, our second security officer, when he was shot and killed, but John managed to shoot the guy that shot him, Eugene showed up and he said, "Jim, I'm awful sorry about your friend John." I said, "Man." And I told this story many times. I'm kind of proud of myself, so I won't tell them more about it, except I'll just tell that which is part of the story, not the entire story. But he came by that morning, when John's blood was there on the ground, and when I'm not going to tell the story, but let me say I brought down my wrath upon the hospital administrator of that hospital, because I had warned him that he needed to take steps after the first security officer was shot. But anyway, believe me. But I'll skip that part. So anyway, Eugene showed up like the next day or something like that, or I'm not sure how he showed up. He says, "Jim, are you going to I went to the funeral home." Okay. No, okay, that was different. Okay. Maybe I'll mention that too. Let me put this over here. Okay, there was a security officer there who was not shot. Frank Cipolla, Italian. Frank Cipola's family was Italian. If you look in Wikipedia or whatever, I think, maybe it's not there anymore. But if you looked at Kansas City, or if you looked up Mafia or whatever, Cipolla, they were the Mafia. But Frank wasn't, because the Mafia was too smart to have Frank there. I don't know what relationship he was to them, but he was family. But John Galegas was shot and killed. Frank's mother passed away, of old age. And Frank was a nice guy. Crazy. There was Reader's Digest was a magazine that was out. I'm not sure if it's still out or not. And they had a thing in there every issue. The most unusual I forget what it was. The most unusual person I ever met, or it didn't say weirdest, but something like that. And the people wrote in the Reader's Digest. I could have put about Frank Cipolla in there in every issue. I would have had material for every issue that was true about Frank. He was a character. Anyway, a nice guy. And I regret it. Really nice guy. When I was working in hospital security, when I was working at Research Medical Center, Research Medical Center that I was working at, they started a Health Midwest Corporation, and they started taking over other hospitals. They took them over. Not all of them, because like one was, Truman Medical Center, a public, thing, and like KU Medical Centers, not that one. But they were taking over, I don't forget how many, just about all of the hospitals in Kansas City, Health Midwest was. But anyway, and so what they did is, and I worked part-time for a year I was still working at my full-time hospital, but I worked a year in order to make money because I already claimed my 4 kids as dependents. That's what the deal with my ex-wife. We were married 12 years. And then the thing is, okay, here's how much I'm going to give you, in child support. Is that okay? Is that enough? Yes. I gave her my father's brand new car. He was a union official. When he retired, he got the company car, and it was not brand new that year, and it was also in mint condition because the union had taken care of anything needed to be done. The union paid for it. So I gave a car, the house, the car, child support, which I couldn't pay out much, but I said, is that enough? And she said yes. So how did I get on that subject? Anyway, so I was working at this other Menorah. Well, anyway, they shut Menorah. I already quit. They shut Menorah down because that Research Medical Center took it over, and then they wanted to move it to a better location. Let's face it, out of the black area, to a better location, out where people have money. And so I was sent out there sometimes to fill in out there. But anyway, I was working at Research Medical Center, and I was thinking about Frank Zappola. I hadn't seen him in years, and I was thinking about him for like a week or so or something like that. And Menorah Hospital had been shut down, and Research Medical Center was building a new one. I ended up going out there when they had me go out there to fill in the beginning out there. But anyway, so I was out in the parking garage at Research Medical Center, and here came a doctor that I remembered from when I worked at St. Joseph Hospital. And I hadn't seen him in years. He was one of the doctors when they pulled into the parking lot, and John's blood was there in the parking lot. And I told him, there's John's blood or whatever, and I said, I just talked to the hospital, and he went. And actually, every one of the doctors, that was a doctor's parking lot, I sent them all, so I am telling it, forget it, okay. I sent them all to the hospital administrator's office. Yes. So, anyway, Eugene Segan, the Kansas City, Missouri police officer, pulled in. And he said, oh, okay, yeah. John Gleggus's mother passed away at the same, about the same time. So I went everywhere. I was married then. I went everywhere with my kids, and so my wife and I and my 4 kids, we went to the funeral home, and I had told Darlene, because I don't think that kids needed to know about death until they needed to know about death, you know. And I didn't. Well, yeah. Okay, yeah. So um, so I went to pay my respects to Frank Sapola's mother, and went in. You ever see the movie The Godfather? Have you ever seen? Did you see those guys? I went into the funeral home, and Frank was so happy that I showed up. I'm not sure that anybody else showed up from the hospital that he worked at. And I went in, went over and paid my respects to his mother, and then he introduced me to all these guys, and he was using their, you know, I forget what they were, you know. Just think, if you watch The Godfathers and they had the nicknames, you know, whatever. That was, and Frank had told me all about these guys, you know. Not what they did, you know, or anything like that. But Frank would never be part of the, you know, that was his family, but they knew better than to, you know, really tell him anything. And they also, of course, I'm sure told him, don't, you know. But so he introduced me to two-fingered, you know, so and so and all that kind of. Anyway, so I didn't stay very long, of course, and I went. But Frank was so glad that I showed up. Anyway, years later, they closed down Menorah Hospital, and and I've been thinking about Frank. You know, thinking I should look him up. You know, because I knew he was getting old. Because I was getting there too, and the doctor came across, and he knew me. He remembered me. You know, and he's one of the doctors that went up there and ripped into the hospital administrator at St. Joe Hospital after, you know, the second security guard was shot. Anyway, he came over and he said, "Oh, Jim, I haven't seen you in years and years. How you doing?" I said, "I'm doing okay, doctor." I said, "I'm surprised to see you here." And he says, "Well, you know, Menorah is one of the hospitals, and they shut it, one of the hospitals, you know, and they shut it down. So he says, I'm coming here until they get Menorah." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Did you get to Frank's funeral?" And I said, "I didn't know he passed away." He says, "Yeah." He says, "I went." No, he went. And I said, I wish I'd have known. I just didn't pay any attention, you know. I didn't know. So, oh, I think I forgot. Okay, back, yeah. I mentioned, oh, Eugene Segan showed up, the police officer, at St. Joe Hospital when I was working there. And that's when John Gallegos was killed. But he managed to shoot the other guy also. That police got him, the other guy. So Eugene showed up and he said, "Jim, are you going to be able to go to the funeral?" And I said, "Well, they're having the funeral here." And he said, "Well, what about to the cemetery?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to stay, and we have to have two security officers here." And it was a bad neighborhood. I think you can, you know, I didn't have to tell him it was a bad neighborhood, you know. That was his district. And I said, "You know, we need to be here, so I'll stay, and another officer will stay. And then the rest will go out there." And he said, "No, Jim, you don't have to do that." He says, "Well, you know, the police, will take care of that for you." And I said, "Oh, I said I'd appreciate it." Of course, I was a pallbearer, you know. And John would have loved the funeral he got, you know, police escort, color guard, the whole bit. And sure enough, of course, before I left, the police showed up. You know, normally you'd have paid them. You'd have, if somebody business would have to pay them or something to work off duty or whatever. Of course, well, they weren't off duty. And so there was a police officer, probably Eugene, I think, sitting in the Wabash parking lot where the shootings had taken place. There was one a police officer, with a car at the circular drive in front of the hospital. And there was a police car over at the emergency room entrance. And we went to the cemetery and came back. And I, thanked them or whatever. Anyway, I mentioned in years later my WordPress thing, I think it was. I don't think it was online. I think it was although they overlapped. I mentioned that entire situation. Eugene Segan. What a great police officer he was. What a great man, and that type of stuff. And then I mentioned that I saw that he had passed away, and then his daughter, she online, she found what I wrote about him. That he was, anyway, I flowingly talked about him, what a great man he was, and that kind of stuff. And then she logged in and she said, oh, thank you. I didn't know her. I didn't know that he had I knew he had a wife, I guess, but I didn't, And she said, oh, thank you so much. She said, I cried when I read what you wrote about my father. And she said, my sister, she said, I had to show it to her. And she said she cried too. So she said, just thank you so much for what you said about him. And it means a lot to us. And she says, right now, my mother, we're not going to show it to her now, but we will show it to her later on when she's, recovered and everything. So, this is going to be a 2-hour. No, I can't make it. My throat's in. I need to get something out of my stomach, and my Coke is already hot. And please leave a thumbs up. What to see? I confess to stealing. I wonder if the statute of limitations. I wonder, it was either Montgomery Ward's or Sears. I wonder if they could come and get me. Then oh, okay, let me go back and cover that. Remember Glenn, the guy who was, who in a movie or somebody would somebody that just immature, anyway, I don't know, but what was there more to be filled? Oh yeah, and then I mentioned that I set him up, which I should not have done. I thought it would be good for because he was so desperate. I'm not going to say horny. I would hate to say that, because then you guys would say, "How did you know he was horny?" Something like that. So, okay. So I wasn't hearing from Glenn because he was afraid I was going to take her away from him. And I told him, I don't want her, And so he became buddies with her. I don't know how much sex he was getting, but she had a couple of I think she had other guys hanging around her too. I don't know if any of them were related to her or what, but so they and his parents, Glenn's parents, well, the reason Glenn was the way he was of course, I guess maybe they knew him, but maybe they made him that way. Maybe they made him the way he was, because he was in the National Guard, I think it was, and he had to tell them that he wouldn't be home, that he had National Guard duty or something or other. I mean, they account, Oh, he told me. That's something I just popped in my mind. I totally forgot that. He had a hiding. He was, I think, 26 years old. He had a hiding place in his room where he could put a Playboy magazine or a Penthouse or something in there, would move to floorboards or whatever, because his parents, would not approve. And I guess I'm not sure if they checked his room or what. Okay, so this girl that I set him up with, and her and her friends, and I'm sure there were male friends, I'm guessing, when his parents went down to the place off of Texas, the island where people go find it hard to believe, go to Texas for your vacation, spend your summer in Texas, anyway, on an island. His parents went there, so for the summer he had access to his parents. I mean, he lived there, but they weren't there, and so that girl and a couple of guys, I guess, of hers, I'm sure they must have asked him, "Hey, can we go to, what about you? Where do you live?" Or, I'm not sure what happened, but it was not good. They showed up there, and I think he had him over, and I guess he was probably showing him all his nice stuff that his family had, They trashed the place. They wrote stuff on the wall. I'm not sure what they wrote. They might. I don't know what they wrote. They might have wrote, Glenn is not good at fucking or something. I don't know what they did, but they trashed the house. His parents. That was it. When they came back, well, that was it. I don't know if they totally, said we don't ever want to see you again or whatever. So, yeah, I did not do Glenn a favor. I was trying to get him laid. That should be a good thing, shouldn't it? No, I guess not. Not if you have the mind of a 12-year-old or something, I guess. Not that. Anyway, that was not. I may have to suffer some time in purgatory for that. That was stupid of me to do that. One, I was getting rid of that girl. She was logging into because I never booted anybody out. So anyway. So that's life. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please, I know I've been bad. Give me a thumbs up. Don't tell Montgomery Wards or Sears, because I forget which one it was. They were both in the same area back then in those days. They were both stores that, I look forward to their catalogs when I was a kid. Not the winter catalog so much. It was like, this thick. And then there was the Montgomery Ward's catalog, and, they would send one out too. So there'd be summer and winter. And I was interested in the summer and it would come. And of course, I was home alone, and both my parents worked, and I was home alone all the time. And as soon as it would come, I would flip to the girls my age in their undies, in their panties or whatever, and look at those, because I'd never seen a naked girl or a naked boy or a naked person. This is before the World Wide Web. So I'd flip, and then I'd go look at the women, with their bras on and their panties on or whatever. That was it. You people do not, you guys do not know how lucky you are now, especially that, of course, you've grown, you don't know how lucky you are. I knew nothing, and plus I went to a Catholic school, Catholic high school. There was no girls at the high school. Just us. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea maxa culpa.